backyard most of the time. We used to do it in our backyard and had have 50 people come out. We'd all have people bring food. And then for a while, it got to the point where we had 500 people come into a backyard, and it got kind of scary because we only had a bathroom at the house.
Wow.
So after doing that, we moved. I moved where I didn't have a backyard, and Meg didn't have a backyard, my friend that I did it with. And so we tried it a couple of weeks ago because Mr. Whitehair down here tells stories in Chicago, and we thought we could cross the cities. And then I realized I could invite anyone anywhere in the world. And I just started texting people I haven't talked to in like a decade or more. And some of you responded, and I'm really excited because it's just, it's kind of lonely sometimes with the quarantines. So with that, I will start us off. Paul, would you mind going first?
Oh God, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to do Paul Normandin.
I think he's talking to me.
Which Paul? Which Paul wants to go first?
No, Paul Normandin. I think he's got it.
All right, we got it.
Okay.
I'll
Well, what I
ramble
do
for
is
a few minutes. We'll see what happens.
I mute everybody and I put one person on the focus. So there we go. All right. Welcome, Backyard Story Night. Give a hand for Paul Normandin.
Hey! Hi, I am Paul Normandin, and I just celebrated a big anniversary, April 2nd, which was 2 days ago, Thursday. And it was a big deal for me, but I guess I should put that in a little context. I'm old. I'm 58 years old today, and 25 years ago, you can do the math, I was 33. Before that, I went into the Army, I did college, I did all the things you're supposed to do when you're young. And when I was kind of done with that, I went to grad school. Sometimes I think that was a dumb thing to do. Sometimes I think it was the perfect thing to do. It was right for me. I was a soccer player. I was an academic. I was a soldier. And I had met this beautiful woman I was in love with, and graduate school and me seemed to get along just fine. But I also found this new sport. And when I say new, it was new to me. It was called the Ultimate, and it was the coolest thing I'd ever done in my life. Because I was really good at throwing a Frisbee. I could run fast. I had just gotten out of the Army and I was in top physical condition, and I was having fun when I played it. And I pretty much didn't want to do anything else. And that mixed with graduate school kind of zapped my brain. That was all I had going, and it was my social outlet, and I loved doing it. And I made the team, and I got to travel with the team, and I got to play in competition with the team, and I loved the competition. I loved it when I'd done soccer, but this was a big deal to me. Now, parallel to my career, finding my sport and finding my niche, leaving soccer and finding my way to Ultimate, there was this other kid that I was watching. I was watching him play a sport that he loved, and really coming to terms with how good he was. And for you in Chicago, you probably heard this story before. It was Michael Jordan. Jordan and I are not that far apart in age. He is younger than me, and we did both love two sports. And at one point, I was following his career like it was the most important thing in my life, because I felt I had gotten too old for Ultimate. I had graduated, I had moved to Austin, Texas, and I had gotten to the point where I thought, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm too old to play sports. But there was Mikey playing at his best. And in 92, I graduated grad school and he was hitting his height. And then in 93, on October 6th, out of the blue to me, Michael Jordan announced he was retiring from basketball. I cried. I'd never been to Chicago. I didn't know the first thing about what it looked like to be there with Michael Jordan on the court. But I cried because the greatest of all time retired. I didn't it took the wind out of me, and it did it for months. And then that spring, Jordan said he wanted to play baseball, and he made a AA team. This is a kid who played baseball the last time when he was 18 in high school, and he didn't even finish the season because basketball took over his life. And he was going to walk onto a AA team as a rookie. And if you don't know baseball, that's a big damn deal. That's like a high school student walking onto a professional baseball field and trying to play at their best. The only difference between that kid out of high school and Michael Jordan was he was the greatest competitor who ever lived. I know what you're saying. I know there's Steph. I know there's Tom Brady. I know there's LeBron. I'm not discouraging you to love them. I'm just old. And so for me, that was the guy. And I watched his career. I didn't watch it like we watch careers today. There weren't video cameras on every cell phone watching him every move, every time he did anything. I didn't get to see that level. I had to do this thing called a box score inside a newspaper. And so the newspapers would cover all the major league games, and then there'd be a box score for his team and how they were doing and how many hits he got and how many strikeouts he had. And the strikeouts were way outnumbering the hits. But I loved Michael Jordan, so I was tracking him every day. And I was waiting for him to be the greatest player who played baseball. And I was just waiting for that day. Now, along the way, I adopted a daughter. I had a house. I married my wife. We became a family. My daughter and I would sing the Michael Jordan song. If you don't know it, look it up. I want to be like Mike. We did the Space Jam. We did all the things that families do because I loved Michael Jordan. But man, I didn't expect him to quit baseball and come back to the NBA. That tripped me up. And when he did, all the newspapers prepared us. All the newspaper prepared us. I was playing Ultimate again. I was playing with a team in town. They had convinced me I wasn't too old. And every newspaper that talked about Jordan's return to the NBA just did a dig on him. Every one of them said he could never do it. He was too old. He would never be good enough, that baseball would have broken him, that he wasn't a good enough player to make it in the Major League Baseball. He certainly wasn't good enough to come back to the NBA. And every word hurt. And I'll be honest, after he played a few games in the NBA, I thought they were right. Man, I was convinced. My hero had died. He was alive and he was getting his ass kicked, and I was sad. My birthday came March 26, 1995. I turned 33. I was seriously thinking maybe I was too old to play again, and maybe it was time to walk away. And when I did, Michael Jordan went to New York City, and he went on March 28th, 2 days after my birthday. And I raced home because the game was going to be nationally televised. And I got home and I watched him walk in. He walked into Madison Square Gardens to play the Knicks. And if you were in the world and into the NBA that night, you know it was the greatest night of Jordan's career. He scored 55 points. He made Starks look invisible on the court. He played the best any human being could play. And I was reminded why I loved him. After the game was over and I had stopped screaming and jumping up and down because they had won, I turned to my wife and I said, I'm going to shave my head just like Mike. That's going to make me a better Ultimate player. And like some of you right now, she laughed. She thought that was hilarious. And I kept saying it over and over because she kept just dismissing the thought that I was going to do this until the point where Sunday came. And I said, let's go get my hair cut. And she looked at me and she goes, fine. Now, if you're married, you know what that means. That means I'm going to resent this and you're going to feel it for the rest of your life. And I felt it in that moment, but I went through it. We just pulled up to the first sports clip. I walked in the door. I got my daughter with me and I say, I want to shave my head. Can you help me with that? I want to look like Mike. And they knew exactly what I meant. And my daughter said, Dad, have them leave a swoosh in the back of your head. To which my wife turned to my daughter and said, go wait in the car. I did not get the swoosh. And I did come out with my head shaved. And my wife would not make eye contact with me. Matter of fact, for the next week, I would go to work and she wouldn't look at me. I'd get to work and everybody who saw me, who hadn't seen me, was rubbing my head. They'd come up to me and they'd be like, that is so cool. You look so good. You should do that. That's really nice. What inspired it? And I would tell the story. Sunday comes and we go back to church. Now, my wife has seen none of these interactions. We get to church and we walk into Sunday school and all the young, attractive people are coming over to me. And right in front of my wife, they are rubbing my head. She can't help but see that they're really enjoying the new look. When we go into the church proper and one of the pastors rubs my head and tells me how good it looks, my wife kind of looks over at me. The service ends, we go out to the car, we get in the car, we're driving away, and I look over and I say, what do you want to do for lunch? And she says, you don't look that bad. I don't know I played any better at Ultimate. I know I'm 58 and I'm still playing. Well, not right now, but I'm gonna again. And when I do, I'll do what I've been doing for the last 25 years. I'm gonna go out, play my best, and try to be like Mike. Thanks.
Yeah.
I hear applause coming from downstairs. I think my wife must have been listening.
I realized I was on mute. I unmuted everybody but myself. I said thank you that I thought your story was good.
Sorry, I was filling. I heard the dead air. I was filling.
And then also I saw that we gained a Jeffrey Murdoch somewhere in the last story. Welcome,
Hey,
Jeffrey. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So this is a very informal storytelling thing. We just kind of go one by one, tell a story. It's not like a show. It's more when I do it at my house, it's in the backyard and people bring food and we just hang out, and it's actually really nice. So this is doing it online because I can't do it in my backyard. And actually right now my backyard is like a giant field full of mud. For that, we'll go up to the next storyteller. Give a hand for Scott Whitehair from Chicago.
Paul, for what it's worth, you got to vote for the swoosh for me, man. I think that would look killer.
Thanks, man.
I couldn't sleep. Everything that happened had been haunting me. And so I stopped doing that thing that you do where you pretend you're about to fall asleep. And I gave up and I got up. And it's about 3 a.m. I poured myself a bourbon and I just sat at my desk. I put my feet up like an old school detective and I just kind of rocked in the chair and I thought, when should I have known? Was there a point where I should have known to walk away? I had just gotten out of a brief but disastrous relationship. And to be fair, there were red flags from the beginning. Some were like a tiny little flag in a cocktail you throw out of the way so you can take another big gulp of sickly sweet liquid. There were a few that were like those giant parade flags carried by like 30 people down the street where you'd have to be way back to even see the scope of it. But most of them were like flags on suburban lawns that just blended into the landscape as you were on your way to someplace else. But I thought, was there one sign where I should have left, where I should have known? Because I like to learn from my mistakes, or I like to identify my mistakes. I keep making the same ones over and over again. I don't want to lead you astray and have you think that I'm saying I identified and it's done, but I feel like it's good to note the same things I do repeatedly. And so I sat and I looked at the ceiling and I thought, what was it? Was there one moment that I should have known this wasn't going to work? And then it came to me, the haunted sanitarium. I had met Gina when I was on a tour of the South. I had been doing some shows and house concerts and workshops. We met in Asheville, North Carolina. And she had come up after the show, let me know she used to live in Chicago. And she was cute and she was funny and she was smart. And although we were both in relationships, we spent late into the night talking and said that we'd keep in touch. And I got home and went back to my life. But a few months later, we realized that we were both now single. And we decided it would be a good idea for us to maybe spend some time together and see if there was anything there. So we decided to meet in Louisville, Kentucky, which I think at this point I should notify you is exactly 666 miles from Chicago driving. And so I go down and we get an Airbnb and we hang out and it's great. It's such a good time. We really get to know each other. The conversation deepens. We don't do much besides drink bourbon, listen to some live music, eat, just get to know each other. That seemed to be nothing but potential. But on the final night, as we're sitting in our Airbnb, I think I want to do something different. I want to do something exciting, have an experience. It'll be fun. You know, we could go down the street to the corner bar again, but let's really do something since we're here. And so as Gina's making a sandwich in the kitchen, I'm looking through my phone at local attractions, and that's when I see Waverly, which is a world famous haunted former tuberculosis hospital. And I go, yeah, that's it. And there's a reason it hit me that this would be a good idea. Gina, in a lot of circles, might be called spiritual, and in many other circles would be called a little woo-woo. She had traded the gap of suburban Chicago for the crystals and mountains of North Carolina, and she embraced it fully. Everything was a sign. Something was always in retrograde. Horoscopes explain the world. She was convinced that we had met in a past life, although she didn't really look all that familiar to me. One time she showed me a picture of a vision board that she had where she had taped and glued little pictures. And she pointed and she said, "Do you see that?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "There's an egg. There's an egg on the board." And I said, "Oh, yeah." And she said, "Do you remember when we had that egg sandwich?" Now, this isn't my thing, clearly, but I respected it. To each their own. And it was fun. Also, you're talking to somebody who has almost the full collection of Time Life books, Mysteries of the Unknown, still about 10 feet from here on a bookshelf. And I'll pull it out every once in a while to read something about ESP. So, I didn't have a problem with it. And I thought maybe this haunted tuberculosis hospital would be some kind of an experience for her because she's into that otherworldly stuff. And so as she came back from the kitchen, I said, "Hey," I said, "I have something in mind for tonight. Do you want to go to a haunted sanitarium?" And she just kind of gets this look in her eyes. And I say, "We can do something else." She goes, "No, no, no. That sounds good. But I think for me, that kind of thing can be very intense." And I said, "Well, let's just go get something to eat then." She says, "No, no, no. I think we should do it." And so I pulled up my phone and I looked through. And of course, because I'm an idiot, this place is world famous. They sell out months in advance. There are no tickets through like the next 2-3 months. And so kind of sheepishly, I say, I spoke a little too soon. We can't get in there. You have to have tickets. So I'm sorry I even brought it up. Maybe, hey, if we meet here again, we'll get tickets. And she goes, "No, let's go over there. We'll manifest it." I said, "Okay." And I thought, well, it's only a 15-minute drive. If we don't manifest it, we could get a burger or something. So we get in the car and we drive through Louisville, to the outskirts. It's a beautiful drive. We're talking. And then suddenly there it is, the former sanitarium on the hill. It's foreboding. It's dark. I can see why this place is so popular, even from the outside. And so we pull into the parking lot and there's a guy with a clipboard and he goes, "Okay, what's your name?" And I said, "Oh, we don't have tickets, but we're just checking. Is there a possibility we could get in?" And he looks and he goes, "You know what? There are 2 people who aren't going to show up tonight." And Gina in the seat next to me just goes. And I say, "Okay, all right, we did it." So we get out of the car, we go in, and we wait in line, and there's a woman at the desk, and she's checking in. She goes, "Oh, this is so exciting." She said, "This almost never happens." And she goes, "You two are very lucky." And I just lean in and whisper, I say, "We're not lucky at all. We made this happen." And I was a little worried if we manifested something bad for these other people too, but I never, there's really no way for me to tell. So we're in the main room, and they're showing a TV program on the wall, one of those ghost shows where everybody's in green light and they're wearing knockoff Ed Hardy t-shirts, and they're like, "Bro, did you hear that? Yeah, bro, did you hear that?" And it is featuring Waverly, and there's souvenirs and stuff. And finally we get ready to go. We line up by the door, and this shorter Southern woman goes, "Okay, y'all. So a couple things before we go in there that we're going to have to cover." She said, "Number one," she said, please stick close with the group. Please stay together. There are some dangerous parts." And I thought, well, yeah, sure, that makes sense. She said, "Number two," she said, "don't be pulling out your phones, everything else, just I'll have a flash. I'll keep us safe in this." Well, that's great. And then she said, "Number three, do not make fun of the spirits. It is not safe to do." And I thought, okay, that might be a problem for me. So we get ready to go in, and Gina locks onto my right arm. And I mean, she's wiry from all this yoga that she does, and gong baths and stuff. So she locks on my right arm, and we head into the tuberculosis hospital. And it's super cool. I mean, it's dark and it's shadowy and it's spooky. And they're telling us stories about like this nurse who had hung herself, and these two sisters had been there. One of the first stops was the body chute. The body chute was the long chute that ran all the way up through the building because people were dying of tuberculosis all the time. They can't carry them down the stairs. They just slide their bodies down the chute and to take them away. It's kind of like a water slide, except absolutely nobody is having any fun. So they wouldn't let us go in there, of course. And so we continue on. And there was a spot where she said, "Put your hand there. Can you feel how cold the air is?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it has nothing to do with that open window, at least within like 6 feet away." And at one point she tried to scare us. She directed us up here, and then she slammed a door shut in the morgue. And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I scare you?" And I was like, nicely done. I loved the showmanship. It was fun. And the whole time, Gina is just clamped onto my arm, where my arm's like, I can't feel my fingers. So finally we go up these stairs and we get to a door. And she said, "Y'all, this floor, I want to tell you right now, almost everyone who comes to visit sees something here. It's the 4th floor. It's world famous. Now come on in. Don't anybody turn on their light." She said, "I want you to look down the hall, look all the way down the hall, and you will see shadow people. They will cross back and forth. You'll see them lingering in the shadows running across the hall." And I said, "Oh, cool." So we stand there. Gina's still locked on my arm, and we're just looking. And you can see things because the light from the windows all the way down the hall playing tricks with your eyes, so you'd see a little something jump. And it was cool. And everybody's standing there in silence until suddenly Gina lets go of my arm, slides around behind me real deftly, and locks onto my left arm and kind of nudges me over a little bit to where she was standing. And I thought, oh, maybe her arm's tired too. I didn't think much of it. I thought, oh, maybe she wanted a better view. She wants to see more shadow people. So after about 5 minutes of that, they said, "Okay, y'all, we're going to go back down." And we head out of the building, and there's more souvenirs. They tell us to come back for Halloween when they have something called coffin races. I have no idea what that looks like. We get out into the parking lot. Gina doesn't say much. Her eyes are real wide still, and she's just kind of quiet. So we get in the car and we drive down the hill. And I said, you want to stop and get a coffee or something at the gas station before we head back? Because I think we had a coffee maker. And she's like, yeah, that'd be great. So we get some powdered cappuccinos, and we come out. We're just kind of leaning against the car before we get in talking. And I finally say, well, what'd you think? Was that fun? Did you enjoy it? Was it what you thought it would be? She said, yes, it was. But as I thought, it was very intense. And I said, well, I hope that's a good thing. I mean, I guess that's what people go there for, as long as you had a good time. She goes, I did. But there was a lot going on in there, a lot going on. And I said, okay, well, like what? What did you see or feel? And she goes, well, at one point, I felt coming down the hallway right towards me an evil presence, just pure malice, and it was coming right for me. And I said, wow, well, that is intense. She goes, no, it was coming down the hallway and I could feel it on the way. It was almost there. And then I realized something and I had a thought and I said, hey, Gina, where in the building did that happen? And she said, on the 4th floor. And I said, the hallway with the shadow people. She said, oh yeah, exactly. And I said, hey, Gina, did you shove me in the way of an angry spirit? And she laughed. And I said, wait, I'm not mad about it. Just, did you feel an ancient evil presence coming to attack you in a haunted tuberculosis hospital and put me in the way of it? And she just shrugged and laughed. Here's the thing. I should have got my fucking car right then, stopped at the Airbnb and went all the way back to Chicago. This by far is the worst thing that anybody's ever done to me. You can tell yourself, oh, but it's not real. And if you don't believe, yes, but to her, it was the most real thing ever. She felt a poltergeist in a tuberculosis hospital clawing its way down the hallway, and she switched places with me. She had options. She could have whispered to me, let's go, a ghost is coming. She could have dragged me out of the way. She could have done anything. She said, we'll fight this together. That would have been great. No. She shoved me in the way. She didn't know what was going to happen. I could have been dragged up the walls and across the top of the ceiling and thrown out a window. Or maybe I just go blank and like 2 weeks later, I climb to the top of my apartment building in Chicago and I jump off to my death. But she didn't care. She just wanted me between it. This to me is one of those moments of character that you read about, like where a guy's with his family and like somebody pulls a gun and he shoves his wife in front of him because he doesn't want to get shot by the gunman. Or, you and your grandma are crossing the road and an out of control car comes and you don't grab her, you just like push her and jump out of the way. It's on that level. So like I said, I like to learn from any relationship mistakes, things that happen. And this is my problem with this. I don't know what to do with this because I really hope that that is the first and last time that anyone ever feels a demon coming to attack their soul and uses me as a buffer. But the reason I like to share this story with others is that a good relationship can stand a lot. Financial problems, infidelity, even arguments, tough times. People are resilient, and when you care about somebody in a relationship, you can beat anything. But if your significant other ever shoves you in the way of a violent phantom, you have all the info that you need. Thanks.
Holy shit. That's, that's one of those things. You don't want people to push you in front of a demon person.
No, before I told that story on stage, I was just telling it to Uber drivers because I thought, am I wrong for being this upset about this? And 9 out of the 10 were like, fuck no, man. They're like, you got to get away. One guy goes, well, is she a good person? And I said, I'm getting the feeling maybe not. And he goes, then you must leave. So 10 out of 10 Uber drivers.
Wow.
It's a public service. If you ever find yourself there. So thanks for listening.
Yeah. Thanks for telling that. That's I think you told me the short version of that story one time, and I've never heard the long version. And that is, it's one of those things,
It certainly
It's dark. It's dark. Yeah.
I like how you workshop all of your stories with 10 Uber drivers.
Look, man, if I didn't have to get home from a bar after drinking, I'd have 0 stories because what are they gonna do? They gotta listen. I tip well.
Yeah, you pay your audience. That's amazing.
That's right.
Well, it maybe helps you know how to tell it better, I guess, or whatever. Our next storyteller is going to be a man that I performed with in Chicago. We went through classes together and did a bunch of stuff with. And then I think after Derek, Alex, do you want to be next after that? All right, cool. So next storyteller, give a hand for
Let's do it.
Derek Aegis.
Yeah.
Let me move that
Thanks,
spotlight.
Jordan,
There we go.
and Scott, for inviting me to do this. I've never done anything like this before, but I just wanted to share a story that I've told a couple times to my friends, and I think it's pretty great. But much like Scott's story, mine starts with an ending of a relationship. I had just gotten through a divorce. Actually going through the process of a divorce. I had moved out of my my place with my wife in October and moved permanently found a place, moved out on my birthday, which is the day before Thanksgiving in November, into a place in Chicago on Belmont and Racine. And the entire experience of going through that breakup it wasn't like anything I've done before. And of course I've had breakups before, but this is the first time it shook me to my core, because I never thought I would ever be a person who was divorced. And my marriage only lasted a year. And I took it really hard, and it had me question who I was and the type of person I was and my character and all the things that come along with the heartbreak of a divorce. But I really struggled with my identity of who I was. And the reason that I chose the place that I did, yeah, it had a good location and it was in the price range and all that kind of stuff. But it was a brownstone. On the bottom level, there was a hair salon that was run by the owners of the building, a vacant storefront. And then I had the next floor, the second floor, and then there was another unit on top of mine. So it was very small. But in the back, there used to be a garage, but the garage had burned down. So now it was just an empty lot, kind of bricks and dirt and nothing really there. But the reason I got it is in Chicago, who I was to my friends in my group and people, other storytellers on this can attest to that. What I did in the summertime in Chicago is I threw these epic barbecues, Memorial Day and on Labor Day. And I would invite as many people as possible, and I would be at the grill all day, 12, 14 hours straight, just cooking stuff. And that's who I loved to be. I loved hosting. I always loved hosting. And I loved getting people together from different parts of my life and having people at these barbecues. So I saw this empty dirt garbage lot as potential to having a backyard in the city of Chicago, which is basically impossible unless you're super rich, which I was not going through a divorce. So I was struggling, and the weather started getting warmer, and I decided that I was going to transform this into a backyard. And the first step, I wanted to build a patio for my grill and a couple of tables. And because I knew a lawn wasn't going to be ready by the time Memorial Day was coming up, but we can lay a patio. So I talked to one of my friends who was a graphic designer, gave him the measurements and gave him the measurements of the pavers. And I asked a couple friends like, hey, would anybody be interested in doing this? I was fully prepared to do it by myself. And they couldn't wait to do manual labor and build this patio. And I rented a truck from Home Depot and got like 3,600 pounds worth of stuff shipped back, going back and forth, unloading all these pavers and cement and making a patio in this back lot of a place I was renting and had only been in for a couple of months. And we spent the entire Saturday in April, maybe 5 friends of mine, making this very detailed, super cool pattern with the pavers, and made like a very awesome, really nice patio. We were super proud of it, and we felt really good about ourselves. So the next day, I woke up and my friends, we were all sore as could be. My friends were all, no one was there. It was just me, and I popped my headphones in and I was just cleaning up, getting rid of some of the garbage, the excess cement that had dried, and just kind of chipping away and just doing stuff. And it was it was like one of those days why it's the reason you moved to Chicago. It was beautiful, bright, like crisp spring morning on a Sunday. And it was probably like 1:00 in the afternoon, and I'm just jamming out and I'm super happy. And I was going to have friends over just to see how the final product was. And I hear broken glass. And I was like, that's super crazy to hear broken glass. So I take my headphones out and I realize that it's coming from my next door neighbor's house. And if you don't live in Chicago, but I'm sure you've seen what a city is laid out. Like our houses were almost touching. And there was a picket fence in between, probably about a 6-foot picket fence that was in between our two places. But if that fence wasn't there, I could probably lay down and touch both buildings. They were super close together. But on the top floor, the 4th floor of this building, I saw that the window was shattering and I saw smoke pouring out. So I had experience with this before, unfortunately, in another fire story in Chicago, but I knew immediately that that building was on fire. For the glass to start breaking, it was going. So my cell phone was in my pocket. I dialed 911, ran outside, started buzzing all of the buzzers, was trying to tell people to get out of the building as I'm on the phone telling them what had happened. I forgot my address. I was kind of in a frantic, was able to figure that out. And within a couple minutes, fire trucks were on Belmont Avenue and up and down. And I had buzzed everybody up until the 4th floor. Everybody had gotten out. I'd buzzed, get out of here, get out of here. Your place is on fire, and the 4th floor is on fire. Paramedics came very quickly. Good job, Chicago Fire Department, paramedics, everybody was there within a few minutes. But I saw them wheel this old man on a stretcher, and he had a ventilator over his face. And they wheeled him right past me, and I saw his arm just limp out on the bed. And I was like, oh, that guy is not in good shape. But it seemed like as quickly as they came, they were gone, and the fire was put out, and it seemed to be contained to just the 4th floor, and everyone left. I talked to a couple of people and they left. None of my friends were there. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody in that building. And so I was like, didn't really know what to do. So I just went back to the backyard and was about to get going on redoing the stuff. And I had noticed that there was like stuff in my yard. They had put out the fire and pushed stuff out of his window, and it fell on my side of the fence. So I was like a little bit annoyed that like there was debris and whatever that I had to clean up. And one of it was like a burnt mattress wire. And I was like, I don't even know where to throw this out. It doesn't fit the garbage can. Then I noticed some things were blowing around in my lot/yard. So I go to pick them up, and they were $100 bills. So I gathered them up, and I had 11 of them. And then I went over to some of the debris and noticed that there was a safe. And it wasn't like a safe. It was estimated at least 18 inches long, 12 inches, or 18 inches wide, 12 inches long, and 12 inches deep. It was a huge thing. And I found the door laying on the patio. And inside, it was jam-packed, filled with rolled up, wadded money. And it was an insane amount of cash, more money than I had ever seen in real life. It was like out of a movie. and no one in the world knew I had it. No one could have known, only probably that man that lived alone knew it was there. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I knew one thing, I was not giving it to the Chicago Police Department. I did not trust the history of the corrupt city, and I didn't want anyone to get this money but the person it belonged to. So I brought it upstairs, and I was shaking. It was a life-changing amount of money, and it didn't fit, the whole thing didn't fit under my bed. I had to store it in my oven because it would not fit anywhere else that it wasn't visible. And the emotions that go along with finding something like that and experiencing something like that it was pretty overwhelming, but I didn't want to tell anybody that I had it. It made me nervous. I don't usually carry cash on me, so to have that much in my presence, I was scared. I was scared of what to do. So I held on to it, and I got in touch with the landlord, and I was like, I only want to talk to him. I was like, yeah, a couple things fell over in my side. I don't know if he wants it. Some of them seem destroyed, but I'd rather. He's like, well, I'll just bring them by. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. So he's like, well, I could put you in touch with his sisters, but he's in a coma, and I don't know if he's going to make it. So I reached out to the sisters, and they said they will be there the following weekend, and their brother was hanging on. And for a week, I had this money in my presence, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. And I started to count it. I took out one roll. It was like this big. One roll. I got maybe a third of the way through it, and I was at $3,600. And I was like, I can't do this. I don't want to know how much money is in this. Like it's just making it worse. So I kept it in my oven, and I couldn't help but think, like, what do I do? I don't have to give this back. I don't owe anybody anything. I certainly don't owe it to anyone who's not this guy. And he doesn't know I have it. No one knows I have it. No one knows it's there. I could just keep it. And then I started trying to justify what to do with it. Well, everyone talks about karma, and, oh, that would be bad karma. People think, oh, that would be bad karma. Well, if you think about it the other way, what if this was the universe's way of paying me back? Just spent $1,100 on a place I'll never use again, made it look nicer. I spent all this money trying to entertain my friends. It's like, maybe I was trying to be nice for all these other people. Maybe this is the universe's way of paying me back. And you try and justify things in certain ways. So the next weekend came, and I hadn't told anybody. And I had some friends over for a smaller barbecue, and we were sitting outside, and his sisters had called me, and I had decided I'm not going to give it to anybody but him, because I don't know what his relationship is with his sisters. They could be just as, malicious or evil, or they could have known about it. They could have ransacked his place. I don't know what really. I have great relationships with my sisters, but that doesn't mean anything. So I met these two older women, and they were like, we couldn't wait to meet you. You saved our brother's life. The paramedics and the doctors all said he was within minutes of dying, and he just came out of his coma. And if you hadn't acted as quickly as you did, he would for sure be dead. He was smoking and fell asleep. His mattress caught on fire. He breathed in a lot of smoke. He was burned a little bit. And they were tearing up, crying, so grateful to me for saving their brother's life. And I could recognize right away, like, these old ladies love their brother. And they said, well, we're going to stay here in Chicago until he's released from the hospital. And then we're going to move him into our place. We have a spare bedroom and we're going to take care of him. He doesn't have insurance. He never believed in banks and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, it's like, but he's really going to want to talk to you. And thank you. And our family couldn't thank you enough. And I was like, oh, well, that's really sweet. I just, I just saw something. I just wanted, just whatever. I wouldn't, anyone would have done that. It's like smoke, you call the cops, call a 911. And I was like, but I actually have something that belongs to him. And I had 2 friends in my kitchen getting stuff ready. And I go and I asked them to move, and I take this huge thing of cash out of my oven, and my friend immediately starts bawling, doesn't know what is happening. And I just take this money. I was like, here, this came out, and it landed on my side. The women bawled their eyes out. They're like, this is savings, and this is, never believe in banks, and this is how he's going to live and survive, and the medical bills and all of those. So they handed me $300. She goes, I don't know. It's not my money. I don't know what to give and what to. And she's like, but he's going to want to talk to you, and I'm sure he's going to want to give you more. He's one of the most generous people we've ever met. And I was like, well, I'm just glad he's okay. This is his. I know he's going to get it. I know you're going to get it to him. Best of luck. Keep in touch. And I then told my friends the story, and we had multiple now, but a very long discussion of like, what would you do in that situation where nobody knows you have it? And everybody went around the table, and some people were like, well, I would have just kept it, or I would have kept some of it. I would have just said some of it got lost. Well, anything that was floating around was fair game, but everything else you get back to them, blah, blah, blah. And then my friend, Nick, smartest guy I've ever met. He's a Harvard graduate, most pragmatic guy I've ever seen. He goes, Derek, I want to think I would have done what you did, but I don't know. If it was actually me, I don't know how I would have reacted. And I was waiting for somebody to say that. And of course it was Nick. And I said, I like to think that I would do the right thing too, but hold it. Hold $150,000 of cash that you don't have to give back. Life-changing amount. And then tell me what you would do. Because it's a lot different when you're in that situation. And it's something that I feel like everybody's opinion and of what they would have done isn't really valid unless they've been in that kind of situation. But it sparked a moral dilemma that my group of friends have been debating now for 5 years. But the new question that I have is, and proposed to them was, what would you do if you were here? A complete stranger that saved your life and gave you back your entire life savings. What would you do for that guy? And I don't expect anything except the one thing I didn't get, and that was a phone call. I never heard from him again. So I don't know, I've never done one of these stories, but just to give you reference of what it looks like, that was the box that I found. And that doesn't do it justice. But I guess I wanted to end the story with a question of what would you do if you were me, and what would you do if you were him? Thanks, guys.
Whoa, that's pretty crazy.
Derek.
Amazing.
That's wild.
Yeah, it was like movie type thing. Like, this doesn't really happen to real people, but it happened on Racine and Belmont.
Whoa. Yeah, that's a hard, like, having that much money, how much, you don't know how much it is. You can't know how much it is because it messes with your head. And we also, we're joined by Christopher Sullivan. I'm now realizing that I've sort of assembled the first improv troupe I was in with Alex and Scott and Chris. So this is kind of fun. It's sort of a surprise. So good to see you. So next story is going to be Alex, and then maybe we'll have Chris go, then Paul. He changed his phone to he's the moon-faced girl because his other computer, he was worried that the Wi-Fi wouldn't work. And then I'm going to go last because I don't want to make anybody go last because, it's just is what it is with going last. So, so with that, our next storyteller is Alex Bay. I was in like a pilot for a bowling thing with Alex Bay, one of the nicest guys I've ever met in Chicago. I think you moved to LA. I don't know if you still live there, but I'm glad to see you. So welcome to the do a story.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Grateful to be here. Well, yeah, I've been hearing, I wasn't really sure what I was going to tell. There's been so many bizarre, odd stories that have happened in the last, well, since I've known you, but, so anyway, I've been hearing little glimpses of people talking about character. And I guess I'll just tell you the story of how I learned of this notion of being a person that has character and what that even means. A lot's happened since Chicago. I moved to give you a little backstory, I moved to Los Angeles in 2007 after a slew of pretty difficult times. In 2004, I gave a kidney to my brother who had a kidney disease his whole life. And then in 2005, and then when he woke up, the doctor said, hey, the good news is the kidney works. The bad news is the disease has found the new kidney. And in 2005, my parents got divorced. And so I started to do some things that were easier to cope with that than actually facing all of the issues, and developed some patterns of behavior that continued on and on and on. And then in 2007, I moved to Los Angeles. And actually during that time in the improv scene in Chicago from 2005 to 2007, it was a heavy, basically the narrative of the Chris Farley or John Belushi narrative was a fun one to emulate. Basically, drink as much as you can, hook up with anyone that you can, and just try to wrap the night maybe before 6 a.m. And it just went on and on and on for a while. Came out to LA in 2007, and then in 2009, brother passed away from a heroin overdose. And came back to Chicago for 13 days and then came back in and just continued the journey of do everything possible to make a movie, do it all as fast as possible, as hard as possible, and just continue and go as fast as you can. I was just full speed ahead, making movies at all costs and doing anything I could at all costs. And so eventually it took a long time, but in 2017, a friend of mine came back into town. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and spiritual man. And he and I had dinner, and I said to him, because my spiritual journey was pretty much like at the end of each crazy night was like a prayer, like God help, lots of pain, help. And one of the prayers I learned over the journey was to pray for clarity and wisdom. And I said to him, I was like, you know what I pray for? And he goes, what? I go, I pray for clarity and wisdom. He goes, oh, that's a nice prayer, because you can just you get to see things, right? I was like, yeah, it's great. I'm really smart. He goes, you should pray for. And I was like, what? He goes, you should pray for courage, because courage will help you walk into what you're seeing. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, I haven't ever done that. And I didn't know at the time when you asked for courage, that courage, when you ask for it, actually you will be given opportunities to enact the act of having courage, things that require courage. And so I was in the process of putting a movie together, something I had written. I was extremely stubborn about some notes from this other producer. One of the producers was acting as sort of a guide to me, and the other one was as well, but I wasn't really listening to him, and I didn't like the process that he had me on, which was extremely intense and uncomfortable and unpleasant notes that I didn't agree with. So about a week after praying for courage, I was at the Chateau Marmont having lots of drinks, and I'd gotten a phone call from the other producer, and he said, "Hey, can you talk?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Listen, man, I won't say his name, but he said, listen, dude, I'm a pimple on the ass of Scott Rudin, all right? Which means like I'm not like a fancy, big named, but I can get your movie made if you just fucking listen to me." And so I was like, all right. And for some reason that weekend, I just applied the notes and I just went into the thing and rewrote the script. And by Monday, I was on the phone with his associate, and we were going through it page by page. And I finally just got this thing to the place where it was like workable, and something had shaken in me to be able to even be in that moment. And so about a month or so later, 2 months later, had a wild night in New York. And for some reason, without going into too many details, the next day I was just like, I don't think drinking works for me anymore. I think I'm pretty good on this. And for some reason had the courage, I guess, to stop. And, a month later into that, I was on the phone with my buddy again, the one who taught me about courage. And he was like, I never told you this story about how I left music for a year, 10 years ago. I was like, I don't know where this is going, because I've spent a lot of time out here in this town, and I've put a lot of equity into this thing, and a lot of personal equity, and a lot of hard work. And I'm like, there's no way I'm leaving Hollywood, And he goes, well, yeah, man. So, my music was okay. It just wasn't really that great. It was kind of doing what I wanted it to do. But he's like, I didn't have any character. And I was like, huh. And I got off the phone, and I was standing in Koreatown, and I felt like I was like supposed to ask God for character, or just ask for character. And I was like, God, give me character. And I felt like God said, are you sure about that? And I said, yes. And he goes, all right, fuck him up. And that day things started shifting, kind of coincidentally, cosmically, like stuff just started to quiet down. And then that night I was at dinner, and this project that I was going to put together, I was having dinner with my friend who taught me about these two notions, courage and character. And I was sitting there, and we were having this last laugh with the bartender, and I wasn't drinking, I was having club soda. And he goes, super salad. And I was like, well, I'll have a salad. I go, what's the soup? He goes, meatball soup. And I'm like, I'll have a salad. And he goes, what kind of dressing? And I was like, meatball soup. And then he goes, what about you, sir? A super salad. He goes, I'll have a salad. And he goes, what kind of dressing? He goes, meatball soup. And it was just kind of this last laugh of the old way of living life. And right then I got a text from a friend of mine who was going to partner with this other company and basically match and do this movie for quite a lot of money. And he said, hey man, I'm just seeing a lot of stuff in your life, and I've got to hold off, and I don't know if this is ever going to change. And he goes, I think you have some stuff to look at. I think it has to do with some wounds, and if you don't look at this stuff, it'll kill you. And I was like, oh my God. And I realized in that moment, like, I've got work to do. And that was what you call a bottom. And so the next morning, I started looking into some certain types of groups, and within a week, I was at a place called Onsite outside of Nashville, and I was there, and then after that, I lived in Nashville for a few months and sat outside, listened to birds, and just started taking in life, and everything kind of slowed down. Reset started happening, and it was a really amazing time. But this is sort of the beginning of what it looks like to begin the process of having character. I then moved to New York, and I lived there for a year and worked at a store. And then within a year, I got a phone call on the year date, March 28th, 2018. So 1 year later, I got a phone call from my producer, and he said, "Hey man, there's an actor who wants to do this movie and he wants to meet you." And so within a few weeks, I met with him, and it caused me to have to, and of course, oddly, coincidentally, so to speak, the apartment my roommate and I were living in Soho, he was moving back to LA. That was going away. And it was just all these things were starting to happen to be like, all right, it's time to go back to Los Angeles, which, you know, was essentially like an invitation back. And so I've been back here since May. We cast the lead actress in October. And that's it. That's it. We're in a process where everyone's in quarantine now, and it's the whole planet is on hold for a second, and it's a good moment to reflect and experience ourselves. So anyway, that's a little story about what happens when you pray for character.
Thank you for sharing that.
Hi.
That's a beautiful, and that's really takes a lot of courage. And thank you for sharing. Seriously.
Of course.
I never know what people are going to tell. Whenever we do this in the backyard, there's always moments when I'm like surprised or blown away by different stories. And I feel like it's just good to hear from all you guys. I haven't seen so many of you in so long. And so thanks for just being here, you know, for just being people.
And Alex, Alex, did I hear you say March 28th, 2018?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was like 23 years to the day when Jordan scored 55 in Madison Square Gardens. I'm just saying. I was like, oh my God, did you really just say that same day?
Wow.
Okay.
That's wild. 23 years to the day.
To the day. So
Interesting.
all right, just thought I'd throw that out there. Sorry about that.
That's awesome.
That's good.
That's cool. Yeah, I heard you mention 28th. Yeah, that's wild.
And I think we scared off Christopher Sullivan. He said he might want to do it another time, but I don't know if he knew he was popping into a grid of people. But
I don't think you do that. Yeah.
Did you invite him in? Yeah. Alex?
Yeah, well, he's funny like that. He's a little bit like Bill Murray that way, that he'll just pop into places at times, and
he's a good guy. I've always he's an interesting fellow. I bought he was like selling an album. He made an album. I don't know how long ago that was. 5 years, 10 years. I'm bad with math, but I bought his album back whenever he did that. It was like a folk thing. And I know he does acting and stuff too, but it was just like, does a lot of different stuff. So
he's a multifaceted human.
Yes. And it is weird that I just put that together, that we all did an improv group. We did one show, and I think for some reason, whoever announced us, we were supposed to be called Herman, and instead we were announced as Johnny and the Brewsters.
I think Punky and the Brewsters.
Punky and the Brewsters, something
Oh
like that.
my gosh, that's
That was
wild. Where
very
did we do our show?
It was like at an Irish.
No,
restaurant.
I know exactly where it was because I do storytelling shows there now twice a month.
It's
Where
so
was it?
weird.
It was Mrs. Murphy's and Sons Irish Bistro.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We've been doing Story Lab and This Much Is True there. So that was where I did my first performance in Chicago. Was there. And then, I'm there twice a month now. It's in a different room, but It's an incredible. And if I can throw out a quick plug, if you're in Chicago watching this, they're still open for takeout. And it's amazing food. I live right down the road, and I get it all the time, and I know they'd appreciate it. So
If this much is true, what else is true, right? Right, Scott?
it's a tricky title because people are like, oh, this much, and I'm like, but we didn't say how much this much is. So
That's fine.
you know, we try not to have them think about it too hard because we want them to listen to the stories. But
I've self-selected myself to go last because nobody really wants to go first and nobody really wants to go last. So I had Paul go first because I know he was one of the guys that suggested we do that, and I knew he'd be okay with going first. And I'm going to go last, so that means we have got one person up next. This fellow used to perform with. We used to have a little group called Germans that was very fun. And then he's a very nice fellow. So if you give a hand, and also whatever, I could tell more stories about you, but you know, we after doing the German show, we went to a bar in Chicago that was a German bar one Valentine's Day to celebrate being alone together. While we were there, there was some nice, turned out maybe not so nice older German men that as we were hanging out, kind of sort of slipped in like some stuff that they didn't disagree with everything Hitler was all about. And that was kind of a weird night that Paul and I had. So we
inadvertently befriended some neo-Nazis.
Yeah. So, but that's not the only thing we've done. We've also done a lot of other things. We were in New Orleans once together. I went to New Orleans to visit you. I don't know if you knew this, but I drove a dumpy Jaguar that I had bought on Craigslist. And I had gotten, when I bought the car, the guy just gave me one key. And I didn't know what a valet key was. But apparently I had bought the car for $1,000 with a valet key. So I drove the Jaguar to see you. And while I was driving to New Orleans in the dumpy Jaguar with like the coat hanger to make the Jaguar on front, because there was no Jaguar, I shaped one out of coat hanger. And I reached down and I kind of flipped the console, and there's this little button that says valet, and I flip it. And apparently that's the key. So if you're like a rich person that has a Jaguar, instead of a dumpy old one you bought on Craigslist, this makes it where the person that valets your car can't steal your nice stuff out of the trunk. So I had a valet key. The only way to open the trunk with when you have this kind of function is to have a real key. I didn't have a real key. The guy just sold one key. And I spent that whole weekend there, but I couldn't access my baggage, my clothes, anything like that. So I just spent the entire weekend in the same outfit, and I never brushed my teeth and I never used deodorant. And that was the time I visited you, Paul, in New Orleans.
You have quite a history with fancy sounding shitty cars. What was that other one you got?
I've had a school bus in the driveway, the little living school bus. I did drive a smart car for a while, which is a comically bad car. I do have I have an old red truck.
What was the one that died in your backyard?
That was the Jaguar. So
that was the
Jaguar. Okay. It died in my backyard. I thought it didn't work. I built a deck around it and a fence, and then thought about doing like a one car, a drive-in theater in my backyard for a while. And then after that didn't work out, we opened up the fence and I gave it to the neighbor because he knew how to fix it. So
didn't you drive that smart car from Austin to Chicago once?
I did once. And I've never driven. Smart cars are kind of regular in Austin, but there are not a lot of them up in Chicago. So when I got there, I've never been so, like, you're driving and people look over at you in a smart car with those little tiny cars with two seats, and they look over like they're angry. They just like make face. They're just like, why? I hate you. And I got the most intense, angry response to being in that car from just driving around Chicago.
Those generally aren't known as road trip vehicles where you're like, all right, let's jump in the smart car and drive for 20 hours, right? From Austin to Chicago?
Yeah, it was definitely not, anyways.
I also remember when we went somewhere once in Austin and there were three of us and we had to pack you into the trunk. And I'm not saying you got into the trunk. We had to like put you in it because.
Yeah, you roll in the back. I never did that publicly, never did that. But yeah, you can technically put someone in the back if you need to transport more than two people.
I mean, yes, in theory you could do that.
Yeah, in theory. So with that, we'll give a hand for our next storyteller. Old friend of mine, haven't gotten to see him in a long time. Give a hand for Paul Jurowitz.
Hi.
Hey.
Hey, thank you so much. What an honor. All of you have told deeply personal and beautiful stories. So I'm going to ruin this with my fuck story. This is how I lost my virginity. This is a true story. It's awful, and I hope you enjoy it. I don't think I've ever told this story in a public forum before, so bear with me. I was living in Eugene, Oregon at the time. After high school, which I barely got out of high school, I had read On the Road too many times, and so I just got in my car and drove and wound up in Eugene, Oregon, because I had a couple buddies out there. I think at this point I was living in my car, which was a 97, maybe it was a 93 Mercury Sable. And I was working at a coffee shop called The Beanery. If you've ever been to Eugene, Oregon, it's still there. Great coffee shop. And I was working for this woman named Carrie, who was my manager. And she was 28 years old. And she lived with her boyfriend, the two of which they had a child together named Thomas. The father was Thomas as well. And Carrie was, she was half Scottish, half Native American. She was into punk music. She introduced me to The Cure and a band called Morphine and some other cool bands. And we always had a fun little banter, sort of flirtatious in nature. I was a late bloomer. I was 18 or 19 around this time. Working in the coffee shop, I don't really know. I think I was in a band at this point, trying to figure out what the hell I was doing with my life. And she needed a babysitter. So I was also babysitting. This story is that cliche. So I'm babysitting for this woman, and her and Thomas, the father, had been going through some difficulties for some weeks now. And one day I went over there to babysit, and he wasn't living there at the time. He had moved out. She's like, yeah, we're going through some tough times or whatever. I should mention Carrie was very good at drinking. She was, you know, she was an interesting person. So one night I get a text from her saying, hey, you want to come over and have some wine, which was different. So I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? So I went over to her house, and we're drinking wine. And usually when people tell I lost my virginity story, it's usually like they listen to some cool band or something, or they're like, we put on some R&B. She put on Ani DeFranco. So I lost my virginity to Ani DeFranco. And we're drinking wine, and she puts her, hand on my knee, and all of a sudden she comes in and starts kissing me. So we're making out, and then she goes for my pants, and I go, I've never done this before. And she lets out this long sigh as if to say, oh, fuck. Well, let's just do this anyways. This is going to be fucking terrible. So Ani DeFranco's playing, and we start, fooling around. We're on the couch. Now I should tell you, this is a house with the couch is like this, and then this is the door. So we start having sexual intercourse, and all of a sudden I hear the door open, the front door of the house, and I look up, and there is Thomas, who is her ex-boyfriend. And I freeze, and he slams the door, walks to the kitchen, and we both just freeze, thinking, well, maybe he didn't see us. No, he clearly saw us. He goes into the kitchen, opens the refrigerator, slams it, comes back out, and I'm like, oh, please leave. He grabs me, pulls me off of her, and now I'm standing naked, and they start screaming at each other. And I'm standing there covering myself, just terrified, because this is a bigger guy. He probably he was short, but he was very strong. He was like a small bear. He picks up a wine bottle and throws it at my head. I block the wine bottle from hitting my head, and it hits my elbow, and my elbow starts bleeding. So I'm bleeding on the ground, and they're screaming at each other. And he's standing at the door, so I can't leave, and I don't know what to do. I'm terrified. Then all of a sudden we hear crying from upstairs. Their 2-year-old son comes down the stairs and is crying, and now they're trying to console their child while I'm standing there bleeding in the living room. Then he grabs my shoes, and he threw one of my shoes on the roof, and the other one over the fence, I guess, to I don't know, make it very difficult on me. He had gotten, I think, muffins or something out of the fridge and had smashed them against the windows of my car. And then he left. And I later found out that she knew he was coming by at that time to get something out of the fridge and was using me to try to piss him off. Yes, Carrie Spruill. I've looked her up since then. I should mention, we did go on to date for about 2 months because she let me live in her house for a while. And then, so anyways, this is also the weirdest part. I lost my virginity on March 28th, which was just a weird coincidence. No, that's not true. But that'd be great if it was. So anyways, yeah, I still, anytime I hear Ani DeFranco, I lose my boner. There was something else I wanted to say. So I did the math, and that Thomas kid would be 20 now, which is fucking insane. Anyways, I haven't had sex since. That's my story. And my girlfriend is in the back on bed laughing at me.
Whoa.
Amazing. Wonderful.
It's good you can laugh about it. You know, you can have a remember the days, the old days.
Yeah.
You know,
It's fun.
We went back to Eugene, and I made my Stephanie. We were on a road trip, and I made her drive past the house where it happened. And I told her the story, and we had a great laugh.
That's amazing.
Yeah. She's not on, I've always wondered what happened to her. She's not on social media or anything. But yeah. That's it.
I'm looking forward to maybe if we do this in a year under different circumstances, we just decide to do it online when we hear the story about what happened after you told the story with her in the background.
I don't know if you guys are watching online the scroll, but Connie said that your mom is listening. Are you sure you want to tell this story? I'm not sure if I got the timing right, but I think that started when you were telling your story. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, that's my mom.
I think your brother is still in the waiting room because some of your people got the link to come here instead of the internet. So I think your brother's been waiting, and I figured I wouldn't let him in because he probably intended to watch it and not.
He's
tell a
like,
story.
when does this damn show start? I've been sitting here for 7 o'clock.
Dr. Brewster, I have to head out, but thank you very
All right.
much for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, guys. Really nice to see you. Thanks for your stories.
Take care.
Yeah.
Peace.
Peace. All right, so I'm going last. I'm going to tell my last story. It is also similarly a story about my last about a babysitting is what kind of triggered you. You mentioned babysitting, Paul, and I was babysitting in Chicago. I was in college in Chicago. Not everybody knows this. I was in college to be a pastor. That's something I thought I wanted to do for a while. And then I used to make a joke about that and say, most people, you know, if you tell them you're a pastor, you know, like most people, it sort of scares them. It's sort of offensive. And you know, sometimes if you think about it, if you say, oh, I used to be a drug dealer, people go, oh yeah, I used to know a guy that was a drug dealer. That's cool, you know. And you say the other thing, and it gets weird. So I was in school to do that in Chicago, and I went in. I decided I wanted to babysit. I needed a job. And there's a part of Chicago down in the downtown area where people are very wealthy. They live in these tall penthouse buildings. And there was a family that had hired me to be their babysitter, a girl who was a friend at college that kind of referred me into it. So I went in and I was going to go babysit for them. And I lasted about a day in the babysitting job. It sounded like it was going to be great. I would be able to travel with them during the summer. I would be able to drive their Mercedes-Benz. And then they lived on this penthouse downtown. And I would be paid very well. But part of the babysitting thing was they had a little boy and a little girl, and there was a moment where I was supposed to help the little boy, and he said he needed to go to the bathroom, and I said, that's cool, you know, you can go to the bathroom. And then I realized that in doing that, he was in the bathroom and he called for me, and I went in, and he was bent over, and he wanted me to wipe him to help him after he'd gone to the bathroom. And as a 20-year-old, this terrified me. I rolled up probably about as much toilet paper as you can roll up into a ball. And then I just kind of dusted his butt. And then I said, cool, way to go. And that was my last day babysitting. But while I was there babysitting, there was on the counter a little, it was Sunday. There was the Chicago Sun-Times, or I think it was the Tribune. Chicago Tribune was out, and there was those little inserts with all the little coupons. There's a coupon there, and it was a $10 gift card to Eddie Bauer. You know, at the time, I thought Eddie Bauer was a great place. But I read the thing very carefully, and I was noticing it didn't say, I'm getting texts from people. Am I off? Is my audio on?
You might want to switch the video.
Oh yeah, I'm not on the speaker view. Oh, you're right. But anyways, I can do that. It's hard when I'm trying to host it at the same time. So anyways, I look on the counter, there's the insert for Chicago, and there's the Eddie Bauer gift card, and I read it very carefully because I'm thinking, wait a minute, there's this gift card, and it says you get $10 at Eddie Bauer, and I'm thinking like, oh, there's some sort of like, you can only use one at a time, or there's like, you know, you have to buy something to get it, and no, it's you use this gift card, and you go to Eddie Bauer, and you can spend $10, and it doesn't say you can use it by yourself. So I go back to the dorm room, a bunch of college friends were kind of looking at it and analyzing. And I'm like, well, let's try it. Let's go buy like 5 newspapers. I'll go buy a sweater and we'll see, you know, what happens. So we do this, and lo and behold, I go buy a $50 sweater with a bunch of gift cards that I got for, you know, whatever it is, 50 cents for the newspapers. And me and the other college friends start to go crazy. We start to go all over the city. My friend had a van. We would go into each corner store, each gas station, each place that sold the Chicago Tribune. You pick up the entire stack of papers, buy them for 50 cents a piece, and then go buy hundreds of dollars of things at the Eddie Bauer. We use the term to refer to it, which I will not use, but we basically went apeshit on the newspapers. We spent so much time for several days. Eventually, it became a thing where the Eddie Bauer in the downtown on Magnificent Mile downtown, the big one, figured it out. But they still had they hadn't put in the legalese that you couldn't do that. So we would go, and apparently we weren't the only people that figured this out. What we were told at the Eddie Bauer when we were buying stuff, we're like, hey, are we supposed to do that? They're like, no, but you can. And then they're like, everybody's doing it right now. So I personally, I think I got $300 to $500 worth of Eddie Bauer merchandise. It was stuff I was a poor college student, gave it to my parents and stuff for Christmas that year. Another friend, several $100s as well. But apparently there had been a homeless person that was also collecting these out of the newspaper trash cans and stuff like that, and had gone in. This was not, I'm not sure if this story was true, but the person at the Eddie Bauer told us he had come in with a trash bag full of gift cards and wanted to try to buy the Eddie Bauer Ford Explorer. He thought he might have $15,000 worth of these gift cards and thought he could buy a car. This was a very insane experience for me personally. Definitely had never done anything like this before. We did spend several weeks collecting. We would go to places that had not yet found out about this particular scheme, and we would go to the suburbs, drive around, try to find any people that still had this particular version of the newspaper. And that year, I did have the nicest Christmas gifts, maybe some of the nicest Christmas gifts I've ever given anyone. And that is my story.
All right.
So thanks for being here, everybody. Thanks for doing this. This was definitely, it was a lot of fun for me.
Thanks for putting it together.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.
It was great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I wish I could see more of you more regularly. I think, you know, I've performed in my underwear with some of you. I've performed, you know, many other places all over, and I wish I could see you more often. So I guess it's nice in a way that we can see each other via the computers. And I don't know why I never thought of hanging out with people on a computer, maybe because that prior to all of this stuff, it might have been very strange to ask. But yeah, thanks for being with us. Thanks for telling your stories and sharing all the stuff. And if you ever visit Austin again at some point or ever, and we can do this in a backyard again, which hopefully someday we'll be able to, you can come, and I'd love to have you sit in my backyard and eat some barbecue and tell a story. So,
John, I want you to know that Connie weighed in again and wanted you to address the character, Paul's character, or at least pray for him, since you were going to be a pastor. I don't know if you saw that on the comments. I thought that was a good comment. Also, I think there's an audience following. So and just in case there is, do you intend to do this again? And if you do you want to set a date so that we can let all these folks know?
I don't know. I guess we could do it again. I guess I could do it. I don't know if next weekend is good, bad. Yeah, we could do it probably in a weekend. And another, I guess, next Sunday. It depends on how many people I can con into doing it. You know, like I just started texting folks.
John, I got to tell you, my mom has a crazy story that she would, that I could get her
You
to
think
tell.
your mom would tell a story?
Absolutely.
It's not
Okay.
about her losing her virginity, right? I don't want to, I'm not judging. I'm not judging.
Okay,
It
here's the
is
deal
not.
with the commitment that Paul's mom is on to tell a story next Saturday. We should do it next
Yes.
Saturday. We'll have Paul's mom do it. Maybe we can get Jeff Murdoch to do it. He popped in here for a second, but didn't know he was doing it. Maybe we can get Chris Sullivan, who was here for a moment and didn't realize he'd called into a thing where he would tell a story.
Kate Caldwell?
Kate Caldwell, yes, definitely. Get some other folks on here. If you know somebody that would like to do it, you can go to Backyard Story Night on Facebook, and I try to respond to the messages. This has generally been a small thing in the backyard. You know, there was a couple times when we did it and we had hundreds of people, but for the most part, it's always nice when it's just kind of a small group and it's sort of informal and it's like we're hanging out. So,
Well, John, you've inspired Drinking with the Saints. We're definitely going to put a show on either next week or the week after. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for making it happen.
yeah.
Yes, thanks
Yeah,
so
thanks
much.
for everybody. And with that, I'll close it out. And then thanks for being here. And yeah, I guess we'll try it next Saturday. Paul, I will be texting you. I'll need the contact information for your mom.
It's very scary. It's a scary story. It's great. I love you,
All right.
John. I
Bye,
love
everybody.
you. I love you, John. John, I love you.
Thank you,
I love
John.
you, John. Bye, John. I love you. Bye. I love you.